A globally recognized name in the petroleum business is Shell. This British company was founded in 1907 and began its commercial operations in Nigeria, an African country, in 1936. In the 1990s, intense dissatisfaction spread among locals in the Ogoniland region of southeastern Nigeria due to Shell's various operations. Oil extraction and supply had rendered the local environment unsuitable for habitation and livelihoods. To suppress the public outrage, Shell employed Nigeria's corrupt government and military forces. As a result, around 100 people from Ogoniland were killed by military gunfire, and nearly 600 homes were burned down by the army. This marked only the beginning of Shell's inhuman activities in Ogoniland. Over the next 3 decades, the petroleum giant Shell systematically destroyed the region's economy and environment. But how could a petroleum company's activities become so devastating for an entire country and its people? And how did Nigeria, a sovereign nation, fall under the control of a single oil company? This episode explores that entire history. In 1833, a British antique trader named Marcus Samuel began selling seashells imported from the East. After his death, his 2 sons, Marcus Jr. and Samuel, took over the family business. During a trip to the Caucasus region in 1890, they realized the growing commercial demand for petroleum and its massive future potential. They decided to shift from selling antiques to entering the oil extraction and supply business. They formed the Shell Transport and Trading Company, named after their father's fondness for seashells. At that time, the global oil market was dominated by Standard Oil, owned by John D. Rockefeller, a member of the American Rothschild family. Experts later compared Standard Oil's monopoly in oil to IBM's dominance in the computer industry in the 1960s. However, Standard Oil failed to expand into Eastern markets. Marcus and Samuel capitalized on this gap and built a rival commercial entity. In 1907, Shell Transport and Trading merged with the Royal Dutch Petroleum Company to form the Royal Dutch Shell Group, now simply known as Shell. To compete with Standard Oil, Shell began aggressive marketing in the retail fuel sector. But the First World War, which began in 1914 across Europe, Asia, and Africa, gave Shell a golden opportunity. The company became the leading supplier of fuel to the British military and was the sole supplier of aviation fuel for aircraft during the war. Over those 5 years, Royal Dutch Shell expanded rapidly. More importantly, Shell realized during the war that petroleum would soon become a key instrument in geopolitical strategy. So instead of focusing on the US or Europe, the company decided to expand in underdeveloped nations of Asia and Africa. There were multiple advantages to operating in such countries. Wealthy nations wouldn't allow foreign control over their fuel. In underdeveloped countries, governments were often corrupt. Even if local people opposed foreign companies, corrupt officials could be easily bribed. Business could continue or be shut down without much hassle. Based on this strategy, Shell began operations in Nigeria in the 1930s. When a nation's government is in a company's pocket, the consequences can be disastrous. Nigeria became a tragic example. When oil extraction caused toxic spills, Shell faced no accountability. Even when oil contaminated soil and water, destroying farmland and killing animals, locals had no voice. Protesting meant facing violence or even death at the hands of the police or army. Long-term environmental pollution also caused widespread cancer and illness among residents. In 1993, the people of Ogoniland in southeastern Nigeria began protesting against Shell officials told Nigerian government leaders that if they wanted future bribe payments, they must send the military to crush the protests immediately. The government didn't hesitate. Troops were dispatched to Ogoniland, and 80 civilians were killed, and around 600 homes were burned. From then on, whenever unrest broke out, Shell used the Nigerian army to suppress the people. To secure their operations, Shell even gifted buses, speedboats, and modern helicopters to the military. Loyal officers received huge monthly bribes from the company. Despite having the government and military under their control, Shell was repeatedly troubled by a small group of Nigerian activists. Leading them was Ken Saro-Wiwa, a renowned environmentalist and writer. He was the president of MOSOP, Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People, which campaigned to protect Ogoniland. Under his leadership, MOSOP's activism began hurting Shell financially. After failing to halt Shell through political means, the group resorted to sabotage, setting fire to some infrastructure. Shell had to suspend operations for days. Seeking revenge, Shell decided to eliminate Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other MOSOP leaders. They informed the Nigerian government of their decision. 3 weeks later, an attack during a protest march resulted in the deaths of 4 tribal leaders. Although Wiwa wasn't even present during the attack, he and the 8 others were falsely charged with murder. After a mock trial and ignoring global appeals on November 10, 1995, all 9 were executed by the Nigerian government. Locally, they became known as the Ogoni Nine. Their families still bear the pain of losing fathers and husbands under Shell's orders. Taking legal action against Shell in Nigeria was impossible. The entire government was in Shell's pocket. So the Ogoni Nine's families turned to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. In 2017, court hearings began. Several former witnesses admitted they had given false testimony in exchange for bribes. Still, the court said there wasn't enough evidence to stop Shell's activities in Nigeria. Shell released a generic statement of regret through its public relations department and escaped punishment. In 2019, Shell finally paid $15.5 million in compensation to a few affected families. But the company's profit over the past 3 decades exceeded $524 billion. The compensation was like a drop in the ocean. Human rights organization Amnesty International conducted a thorough investigation into Shell's activities in Nigeria based on internal documents. They found that Shell knowingly unleashed the military on local civilians and repeatedly encouraged the Nigerian government to take anti-people decisions. Shell executives, however, denied all allegations of wrongdoing. This tragedy of Nigeria shows what can happen when a commercial company controls a country's destiny. The alarming truth is that even today, many underdeveloped nations remain trapped in the web of powerful companies like Shell. Whether any of them will suffer a fate similar to Nigeria, only time will tell.